So welcome everybody. This is the second in a series for our Mountain Midwest webinar series with our speaker, Jebeh Edmunds. Jebeh is the CEO of Jebeh Cultural Consulting and also recently named the director of Leadership Duluth. So we're really excited. I don't know if anybody was here for the first webinar with Jebeh. Maybe raise your virtual hand if so. I'd like to see who's kind of here following up from that first one. Maybe a fresh round of folks, which is totally fine, but welcome, and I'm going to kick it right over to Jebeh to get us into the content for today.
Thank you, Ellie. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk all about how to be culturally responsive with our BIPOC students. So let me share my screen really quickly. There we go. All right, can we see it okay? Awesome. All right, so let's get started. How to be culturally responsive with our BIPOC students. Hello, I'm Jebeh Edmunds. I am the founder, CEO of Jebeh Cultural Consulting. I specialize in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging training with for-profit and non-for-profit organizations. I am a proud Liberian American immigrant. I immigrated here 40 years ago and been in the educational field for over 20 years. And I was nominated last year for the 2022 Goldfine Gold Star Teacher of the Year Award. With my consulting firm, my biggest mission is to educate as many people as I can through my multicultural resources that I have vetted and researched in order to promote positive change. There's so many things out there that cause harm, especially with our BIPOC individuals, and I want to make sure that whatever we have in front of us is inclusive of everyone in the room. So what you're going to focus with me today is you're going to learn how to be culturally appropriate when we are interacting with our BIPOC students. So many of us have our inclusivity hat on and we have the best intentions, but sometimes our impact is causing the most hurt. So I'm going to give you a lot of very good strategies of what you can do to keep it positive and responsive. So all of our children's identities are different and valued. And when you are interacting with children in your programs, a lot of us might have some questions just in the back of our minds if we are not too how do you say it, too exposed to people of different cultural groups. So I remember working in an after school program where a young girl had a hijab on, and one of my colleagues was like, why does she have to wear that? And having those conversations to make that child feel welcomed was something that I would tell my colleague, we need to do some studying, we need to do some research, and when we would go to Lake Nebagaman, we had to be, accommodating for that individual child. So there are some things that when you are interacting with students, even those questions you might have, you need to really be cognizant of doing your own research and valuing that particular child. A lot of us BIPOC students, we do a lot of code switching. My name is an ethnic name, and I remember the values that my families had instilled in me. There's some things even in my dialect. I have to switch that dialect from my Liberian English to the American English to assimilate, to conform to the majority culture. And a lot of our students do that on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of like our default setting. And so when you are interacting with students, a lot of us are leaving our authentic selves at home in order to assimilate and accommodate the people in the majority culture. So we need to, as facilitators and working with students, is how can we foster that welcoming environment where that student in front of us can be their full authentic self. And what our diverse families want you to know, that our child that comes in, they're here to learn. They're not here to make trouble. There's so much research out there when it comes to behavior that when a child is acting out, it means they're crying out for help. They need help in some area. And maybe a staff member had a negative experience with that individual a year or two before, and they come back and you hear that staff member go, oh, here we go, here comes trouble. And then you have that file folder and bias behind you in your subconscious going, oh, well, they were trouble for my colleague. That must be trouble coming for me. And that's not necessarily true. You don't understand. Maybe that interaction with that colleague that you had was probably their own assumptions about that child. And that child absorbed that and said, oh, if you're going to assume I'm going to be this way, well, then I'm going to show you what I can do, right? So think about this. When a child comes into your program, always assume the best. Don't assume the worst. I can't tell you how many times where when I was in the classroom, I didn't even look at my students' files until 6 weeks in the school year because of all the assumptions that the previous teacher would give and feed me. I said, nope. I'm going to have that child come into my classroom space, into my program space with a clean slate and just ignore whatever my other colleagues had. So those are the types of things where it perpetuates more negatively if you are taking that negative feedback from your colleague. We all want our kids to be at their best. And when you do have those conversations with those families and adults, you need to come in and just saying, you know what? I know your child isn't like this all the time, right? So come into that approach when you're making that contact with that parent or with that guardian to say, maybe Mateo is on an off day today. That's my son. Let me just call you first just to kind of give you a heads up of what we experience in our program today. And maybe there's something you can help me in helping Mateo feel more confident and comfortable in our space. So when you have that kind of approach, when you have that kind of impact with that parent, I feel like that's something that you can do as a partner versus as an adversary. Now, to also reiterate, our head coverings are valued and also as a part of our body. And so when you are having swimming programs, you need to think and research what kind of accommodations can you have so that child with the hijab isn't excluded. We don't want to be that child. We've all been there when we felt othered in a situation in our lives. So if there's something you can Google or research online that you can have something that is protective of that child with their hijab on or their Sikh fabric on their head so they can still participate in your programming without having to sit out. Because there's nothing worse with all the kids, I call it rubbernecking at that child at that pool deck, and they can't participate because you don't have the tools to accommodate. And it's something simple that you can find on Amazon or on Google. You can ask the adult, is there something we can do to protect the child's hijab or sacred garment over their head so that you can be responsive instead of reactive of, oh my gosh, this child is coming into our pool setting or at an outdoor event and they can't wear the helmet that we're doing some climbing club thing. We need to figure out, is there something that we can have in our budget just in case when we have a child into our program so they can feel that they belong in the group instead of having to sit out and watch all the other kids have all the fun. Okay? And I also want you to think in terms of our BIPOC family structure. They're highly valued and they are different. So when we come together, I remember going to a YMCA birthday party and there were some families of color there. And when we're excited, we make a joyful sound. I always say that when we're very passionate people and when we're having fun, our decibels go up because we're having a good time. And I can't tell you how many times a staff person would kind of look into that birthday room and kind of give us that look like, you better watch it. Watch your tone. If you get a little too loud, I'm going to have to call the authorities. It's a birthday party right? And so thinking about cultural groups and when they do gather, it's not a threat. It is something to be celebratory. And we're in a celebratory mood. But I can just remember feeling that, oh, we got that look. Oh, we're on watch, right? There's gonna be people that don't celebrate the way that you do, and that's okay. But if they rented your space and they're members of your organization, they have every right to be there to celebrate their child. And so having a staff member, walking and kind of giving that nonverbal cue of you're on notice, that is something that doesn't make a person that looks like me feel like they belong fully. So those are some things that you need to help with your staff to say, yep, they're just boisterous. They're having a good time. It's okay. There's no need to have that silent watch. There's no need to have that extra monitoring. We're just there to celebrate our child. And some really helpful tips when you are in your programs. There's a lot of really good research on cultural responsiveness. And this is something that I've done in the classroom for over 20 years, something that you can do in your programming before, after school, even your summer programming is, just build on that student's life experience. Things that you could ask that child, is your home multi-generational? How do you guys prepare your dinner? Get them involved of what programming you're going to do. And invite the adults from the home to come in and help with programming. Maybe there is a storytelling night and you've got friends and families from different culture groups to share their folk tale from their cultural background. Little things like that you can do to tie in that child's lived experience. And also hold our children to our high academic expectations. I always say when you have that high expectation of this is our programming, this is what you're going to expect, you need to be consistent with that. And when you show what you know, that child is going to show you tenfold of what they can do. But if you have the assumption of, I don't think this kid is going to be able to make this robot, or I don't know, I'm just going to assume that this child doesn't know what they're doing in this space, this is when things go bad. And this is when students go, oh, they don't even have faith in me. They don't even see the potential in me and who I am and what I do. Maybe that child loves STEM activities, but you never took the time to ask them. Right? Maybe that child is really well versed in the arts and really loves theater, but never got the chance to make a play. And maybe that's something that you can have those conversations and putting on a play. Maybe they want to be involved in writing it. So those are the types of things that I always would have in my classroom, that high expectation of this is what you're going to do. This is what we're going to learn and achieve together, and just go for it. And also understand that your own cultural identity and its consequences. We are in this racial society where our weight is measured by our racial background. And so to understand your own privilege, socioeconomic, even racial privilege, is going to have its own consequences, and see with the other students that are in your program and the consequences that they hold. Not of any of our control or even any of our creating, but we have to recognize that it exists. And some really neat strategies, even with keeping the conversation going, is always, always, always ask those open-ended questions. What did you mean by that, Timmy? What did you mean by that, Rebecca? Those are the kinds of things where you can constantly keep that culture responsiveness language going. Sometimes we know as adults we misconstrue things. Kids do that too. And so when you're asking them that question of, oh, what did you mean by that? Have them take on that leadership and go, oh yeah, I didn't mean to say it that way. You can resolve a whole lot of conflicts that way by re-asking. What was your thinking into this, or why did you behave in this way? Have that child come and answer the best way that they can of what their mindset was at that time, and then problem solve together. You know as well as I do, there's going to be conflicts. We're in this human experience together, so kids are going to have conflicts, adults are going to have conflicts, but what I really suggest is you get to that conflict head on. Take the student aside so they're not amongst their peers. Because trust me, when those peers are listening, they have the best hearing, but they're not hearing you when you want them to do their typical procedural things. But when someone's in trouble, ooh, they really listen. So when you take that student aside so they're not in front of their peers and have that conversation, hit it head on and just say, great, we solved the problem. Maybe I need to bring in another adult or bring in that student's parent involved, talk about it, work through it, and say, okay, great, we're going to start fresh tomorrow. I always said this to my students so that student knowing the next day, I'm not going to be thinking about that conflict we had the day before. Because you know as well as I do, when that student already feels uncertain about the relationship that they have with you, and if it's not resolved and you're not going to start fresh, they're going to carry that back with you the next day. So when you just say, yep, we got it, all squashed, or maybe this is something we're going to continue to work on, but I can't wait to work on it again with you tomorrow. Give that reinforcement to say, yeah, we make mistakes, yep, but you know what? We'll start fresh tomorrow. That is so important. And then, of course, keep that anti-racist dialogue open. Share those multiple perspectives, and not saying you're speaking for the other cultural group, but have it open so all people can talk. All people can share their own experiences. I really love Gloria Lanson Billings. She's got really, really great research on cultural responsiveness, especially working with kids. And she says, and I quote, all instruction is culturally responsive. The question is, to which culture is it currently oriented? Which cultural group is at the main spotlight? That's what she's saying. And who's missing? What perspective isn't there? And why isn't it there? So when you're thinking about bringing in books and materials, I really want you to keep this quote in mind. Who's in the spotlight, right? Who is in that room? And even if they're not in that room when you're doing the program, we need to have the other voices in that program. So think about that. Who's missing? Who's in the spotlight? And why? Why are they not here? Why are they missing in this piece in our program? A really great concept of opening up this cultural responsiveness is a new way of sharing your own cultural identity that you can even be immersed in with your students is, I am. Who are you? And what do you have to bring to share with everyone? And everyone has a culture. We all come from different cultural groups. And it doesn't even have to be ethnic, but just something that you hold dear and hold important to share out with as many people as you can, even the students that you serve. And what I love to do, I did this with my fifth graders, is you can pick from this category two things and write two sentences starting with I am. And then you end the sentence with a family saying, a favorite food, a holiday, a tradition, a quote or affirmation, even a family mantra. And so this is something you can practice with your students and staff. And what I love to do is, for example, I would share, I am from fufu and soup. I am from African clothes for Sunday school. Simple. And you don't even have to dive in even deeper, but it's just something that you can share out with your students, share out with your program students of something that they can share. And it's something that's quick. They don't have to think too deeply about it. And something that opens up that layer of understanding your students. Something that's simple and, like I said, very quick. And if you want, you could even make it as a poem in your program and have your students write two of each of the categories. There's so many I am poem examples. We did that with our fifth grade students for over 10 years. And it's just something that shares with you and that student who they really are and what they want to share about themselves. Now, when we are doing this work and we're talking about cultural competency and cultural responsiveness, we need to recognize we have our own implicit biases. And what an implicit bias is, it's our own unconscious stereotypes that we were fed and learned and taught by adults in our lives from our formative years. It's from all types of mediums in entertainment, in news. It's from, like I said, your neighbors, even the representation in your books that you would read growing up. So thinking and recognizing that we all have biases and we need to recognize it, and we need to know when it creeps up, how to check and correct that, especially when you are interacting with people of color. And then you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're going to meet families that don't look like you, think like you, sound like you. And when you interact with that person, there's no need to be intimidated. They're a human being too. And so when you are in that uncomfortable feeling of, oh, I got to talk to Mateo's mom again. Oh, I don't know. She's kind of loud. That's just how it's going to be. You just have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And because I'm boisterous and because my personality is, very direct, you're going to have to get used to that and say, okay, this parent is this way. Doesn't make them less valued, doesn't make them any better or different, but it's that family personality that I need to get comfortable by being around. Okay. And then, of course, you need to become more engaged to build these authentic relationships. Talking to Mateo's mom more often on more positive notes instead of the negative. Oh, here we go again. Here's a why. What did Mateo do now? Oh, actually, Mateo did a wonderful thing in setting up our swim meet. Oh, wonderful. He helped with the ribbons on the table. Well, that's wonderful news. Thank you for calling and celebrating my son. Those are the types of things of how you can build those authentic relationships. And then journal. Always writing up, okay, this is a book I need to look on or read about, younger kids from different cultural groups. For example, there's a really great book by Beverly Tatum that talks about why are all the black kids sitting together in the cafeteria. Great book. Read about it and talk about why do different pockets of kids of color sit together. Why is that such a phenomenon? That's another thing. Find a book about DEI and journal about it, your thoughts, your feelings about it. That's a really good tip. Some really fun multicultural games to foster inclusivity. I did this in my classroom. Like I said, I love all things multicultural. So I got some really fun ideas to share with you that you could do in your program. Greetings from all over the world. Find a language. Pick one. Gotta love Google Translate and have that as your greeting for the day. This is to say hello in Oromo. It's a tribal group from Ethiopia. They say akam. So every day for that first day, you're going, oh, here's our greeting for the day. We're going to greet each other. Akam. Research the cultural groups, the languages that is spoken in your group first. Get those language greetings and ask the child, how do you say it? Do you say good morning? Do you say good afternoon? Is there a different word for good afternoon when I see you? Let's put it up on the board or let's put it up in our room where we can be cognizant and say it for the day. And then I always have the flag that country represents. In my little country of Liberia, we have 16 different tribal languages in one country. So the Oromo people, they belong to the Ethiopian group, the Ethiopian country. So I have the flag there. Little things that go a long way. Another thing is sharing. Oh my goodness. And another fun open-ended question. What is one thing that not very many people know about you? That's something that your students can share with you in your group. Lots of fun open-ended questions. And you give them the time and the space to share it. And I used to have a little spatula or some like sharing stick that, it gives everybody a turn to share out something. I was that excitable kid. I was the one that was the blurty one. I even had in my my report card growing up, talks too much. Well, look where I am now, right? So even if you have like a special wand or anything that the group can come up with to share, that gives everybody that turn, and sometimes kids don't want to feel like they want to share, and that's okay. Give them the opportunity to say, you know what, not today, Mrs. Edmonds. Okay, pass it down. And that's okay too. We don't want the child to feel that they're on the spot. Maybe that child that passes the baton, maybe they could write it in a card and share it with you and just put it on a post-it and put it on your desk, or can I just read it just by my eyes? Okay, I'll write it down, and then it'll just be for your eyes, Mrs. Edmonds. So, that's okay too. So they can still have the power to share, but they can still have the power to share how they want to share it. Okay. Next up, really fun hands-on activities is catching stars. This is a really fun African game, kind of like setting up your group into two small groups. The smaller group, they're going to be the catcher of the stars. The bigger group is the stars, and just kind of catching as many stars as you can. That's a really fun one called Catching Stars. I love their little saying, starlight, star bright. How many stars are there out tonight? Could do it at night if you want, whatever your heart's desire, something really fun that students can do. Another one, I love a good relay race game. This is from Belize, a lime and spoon game. Just get a plastic lime and a plastic spoon and kind of go back and forth to see how you can balance that lime to get from one side of the room to the other. Lots of fun ways that you can do it. Of course, the big, crossing, everyone getting to one side first wins. So something very fun, and that students can locate on the map where that game originated from.
Is the lime cut up?
No, just kind of, like those, how we had in like preschool, like the plastic lime. Right. So you don't have to get a real lime if you don't want to.
With the size of a shot of tequila? No.
That might be for after hours. Yeah, that works. But when you do like family nights, some really good strategies is story quilting. I know the Hmong people have wonderful story quilts that you can, see if you can collaborate with different groups. African American, after slavery, did lots of star quilts, even under the Underground Railroad. There's so many things and videos that you can share and to show the similarities with quilting around the world. Very multicultural. Make and take nights, multicultural crafts that you can do together. And even a multicultural spotlight speaker. Now, when you have a spotlight speaker that comes in from different groups, we don't want to exoticize them, right? We want to have them to come here to have their voice heard. So maybe have them share maybe their their history that they feel comfortable to share out with. Maybe have them share a fun story or a fun game that they can help with your students as well. So it doesn't have to be, we know some families and some people don't feel comfortable public speaking, but they can share in a way where everybody can participate. So they're not just the one standing there with the microphone. There's so many ways. Maybe they could teach a cultural dance or teach something, or how to make a recipe where they're speaking out and they're sharing, but not everything is spotlighted on them in that way. Love virtual multicultural classroom field trips. There's so many museums that have virtual field trips out there. That's one thing with COVID, that there were so many things pushed into a virtual platform that you can access for your group. So that's another really big thing you can do. Also, what I also thought would be really cool is multicultural celebration night. Students can pick a country, or students from that particular particular country can have a cute little poster board and have some fun facts about that country to celebrate. We used to do up in Duluth, I used to call it multicultural festival night, and kids could pick whatever country they wanted to research and really make a fun poster. And when families came together, they would see all the different countries being displayed and shared. It could be games, it could be anything that you would like to do. And like I said, storytelling and folktale night, that's also another fun collaborative event that everybody can get involved in. So some really big key takeaways that I really want to leave with you all today is keep things consistent. Inclusive language, we're here for all. Come on, campers. You don't have to genderize anything when you're talking in groups, but keep it very inclusive. And also research new resources. I have a wonderful website that has lots of activities that are African American historically based. So that's a starting point. But there's so many resources out there that you can be culturally responsive. And then, like I always say, try some new activities. The biggest thing is to experiment and to try again. This is a long game. It's not a one and done. So those are some things that can help bring more BIPOC families. Maybe have a spoken word night and invite all people to come in and listen. That's always fun. Getting young people, universities that are neighboring involved. That is also helpful as well. So some really big key concepts I really want you to keep in mind is have those high expectations for your students, and still you can do that and still value their cultural identities. We don't want to assume the worst. We want to assume the best in all of our kids. And of course, fostering that multicultural resources, to have more representation. What does your signage look like? What are the books and the activities that they're doing? Is it inclusive? Who's in the spotlight? Who's left out? Those are the types of things. And self-awareness is so important on this journey. Doing that journaling, doing that self-reflective process of your own internal biases is very, very important as well. And feel free to contact me. I have lots of multicultural resources out there. I'm always putting out new content every week. I have a wonderful podcast called the Cultural Curriculum Chat, where I review lots of BIPOC written books and showcase BIPOC authors, so you can listen and find lots of research there. I have a YouTube channel, Mrs. Edmunds Cultural Corner, where I showcase the books as well. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, all the things, all the places. And like I said, I've got lots more blog articles on my website, jebehedmunds.com. And just the world is your oyster, and I'm so happy that you are working with our future leaders. And trust me, this work is hard and so rewarding, and I'm so happy that you are a part of it. So thank you very, very much. I'm going to open it up to any questions you might have.
I will stop the recording here.